Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. My name is Kingnusmi. We are going back to sitting down for a little while because my microphone is stupid. Literally if I move it, it'll disconnect, so it's gonna stay right here. Last week I ran a poll asking you guys what episode of Creepshow you guys would like to see, and unsurprisingly you guys voted for Public Television of the Dead. It's one of the most popular episodes of Creepshow, so it didn't surprise me at all. We're good. We're good, I think. And for those of you guys who don't know what Creepshow is actually a set of movies that was made in the 1980s, and then there was a random third one in 2006. These movies paid homage to the old 50s and 60s horror comic books, such as Tales of the Crypt and the other ones. But we're not going to be talking about the movies today. We're actually going to be talking about the 2019 TV series on Shudder. And across all 4 seasons, it has terrifying horror, awesome monsters, gruesome gore. From Nazi killing werewolves to evil flowers, this series really does have it all. Now that being said, this show is a little bit more graphic than The Haunting Hour and Goosebumps, so I will have to blur a few things that I think YouTube won't like. But if you're a gross person and wants to see the disgusting gore, then you can go over to my Patreon, where the $5 members will get the whole uncensored episode for free. Now, on my last video, I briefly mentioned that Creepshow had an episode that stars Bob Ross versus the Evil Dead, and that got a lot of you guys intrigued. So intrigued that I obviously had to put it on the poll, which it obviously won. Don't worry, I would have voted for it too. And it is the second part to the first episode of the second season. And it's definitely one of the better stories in the whole series, and I'm really excited to talk about it. But before we talk about it, I want to give a little brief summary of the Evil Dead franchise, because some people might not know what it is. The Evil Dead franchise was made by Sam Raimi. Yes, the same Sam Raimi that made the Spider-Man movies. The first film follow a group of teenagers as they go vacation in a remote cabin in the woods, where they discover the Necronomicon, or the Book of the Dead. They unleash evil forces onto themselves, and slowly each friend fall victim to the evil spirits that come out of the book, leaving Ash Williams to somehow survive it and continue fighting it for the rest of his life. Not joking. The next 2 movies, he's still fighting the Evil Dead. Then he has a TV series where he's fighting the Evil Dead, but he's an old man, and that series is awesome. And it became a pretty big cult classic, and I highly recommend you watch these movies if you like funny horror movies. They're the best. They are the best. But that's enough yapping. Let's get into the episode. We start the episode flipping through some comic book pages, and unlike the last video, I actually decided to go frame by frame and check out each comic page to see if there's anything interesting in any of them. And the first one we see is this terrifying picture. It's just a illustration of somebody with their eyes sewn shut. At first glance, I had no idea what this was, so I decided to reverse Google search it. And it's really cool because it's actually an old ad for a shrunken head keychain kit. And I couldn't find this exact picture on the ad, but this picture and the one right here are pretty close. They're pretty much the same picture. And the next funny thing we get to see is the creep is just making fun of the Titanic for some reason. And lastly, we see an ad for The Victim, which is a voodoo-ish doll that's used in the previous story, Model Kid, which you can watch in the same episode as this one. And next we see the introduction panel that reads, "Hello kitties, and welcome to our newest frightening fable filled with delightful demons and a book bound in human flesh. To get your own, you just need to read these words. Kanda, Estrata, Klatu, Barada." I'm not finishing that. I'm not even going to test it. Now travel with me to Pittsburgh as we enter the soundstage for Public Television of the Dead. And then we get a cool transition to Miss Bookberry. And she's the host to a children's TV show known as Miss Bookberry's Magical Library. And today she's reading a story to teach the kids about karma, which is a little weird now that I think about it. I wonder if it's like important to the episode and that's why I mentioned it. And next we get a glimpse of the behind the scenes to see how the show is run. Mrs. Bookberry is recording a commercial for a donation event for the station that she works at.
It's the WQPS Pledge Drive. That's where we ask all the mommies and daddies out there to fuck.
But she keeps forgetting her lines. And this is when we learn that Mrs. Bookberry isn't as nice as she portrays herself on television.
Okay, whatever, here we go.
She's actually the worst. So after she finally gets her lines right, she decides to go to her dressing room and do her business. But this is when we get introduced to Claudia. Claudia is one of 3 main characters in this episode, and she's the station manager for WQPS. Claudia and Miss Bookberry have a conversation about giving Bookberry an earlier time slot. Claudia doesn't want to give it to her because it's already there for a show called Love of Painting, and it's been that show's time slot for 10 years, and it won't survive if they put it in any other time slot. But Bookberry doesn't care. She has the biggest show on the station, is the only reason people watch the station, and if she wants that time slot, she's gonna get it. Even taking it as far as threatening Claudia's job.
They took a big chance on promoting someone like you to station manager.
Huh?
What do you mean by that?
You got me, sister?
Nah. I would have punched her in the face. Sadly, this episode is set in the 70s, and Claudia just has to bite her tongue and take the blatant racist remarks. And Claudia gives Miss Bookberry that 3 o'clock slot. Also, put Miss Bookberry on the list of terrible characters I've talked about. We cut to the set of The Love of Painting with Norm Roberts. It's a very obvious nod to The Joys of Painting with Bob Ross. And I really don't need to mention all the similarities that happen in this episode with these two. There is a few that are kind of funny, like Norm is balding while Bob has a beautiful head of hair. They even added little Easter eggs in the episode.
And we'll shake it off and just beat the devil. That really is the fun part of this whole technique.
This is my favorite part. Just beat the devil out of it.
Not to mention there's a little devil on his easel too. Now listen, I can talk about all the similarities all day. There's so many. You can obviously see it. But we have an episode to get through. Claudia has come to their set to inform them that their show is sadly being canceled. And even hearing this sad news, Norm just says,
Oh no, it's too bad.
and then asks if he can record just one last episode, which Claudia grants them. George and Claudia then go off to the side to have a private conversation. Claudia is wondering how Norm is always so calm. Even in hearing this bad news, he's not angry at her that she basically pulled the rug out from under him. Well, my friends, that's because Norm was a Marine in Vietnam. Apparently, he had to do some pretty terrible stuff to get out of it. Cut to a different show, and this one's called The Appraiser's Road Trip. And it is exactly what you think it is. An old dude appraising things. Very fun, right? He appraises things like snow blowers, medieval swords, a jar of Civil War coins. Anyways, this man shows up to the show to get this book he has appraised. And this man is Ted Raimi, playing as himself, Ted Raimi. Who is Ted Raimi? Sam Raimi's brother. I'm glad you figured that out. He brings our appraiser, Goodman Tappert, a book bound in human skin that apparently has been in his family for many years. Tappert is really impressed with this book, but sadly the book is locked, and Ted lost the key. It's a bummer. I was really excited to see what was in there.
But then it was found.
Then why didn't you say that, Ted? Tappert unlocks the book and opens it to find that it's written in a strange language. And it's also filled with creepy imagery. And as he scours through the book, Ted is just excited that he's gonna get a lot of money.
What do you think, a Camaro or a hot tub?
Hot tub.
Yes.
Tappert says it's written in Kandarian and any museum would pay $300,000 to $400,000 for this book, which is crazy, insane, and this dude was gonna throw it away.
I nearly threw it out like a million times.
And luckily for us, Tappert can read Kandarian for some reason. Very convenient. It's a little strange how convenient that is. And this is when we learn that the book was the Necronomicon. The Necronomicon is the Book of the Dead and is also how the Evil Dead is released, but only if you read a certain incantation. So obviously, Tappert starts reading that exact incantation.
Listen to these wretched incantations.
And while he's reading it, the book seemingly takes over his body and forces him to finish it even though everybody wants him to stop. Which in turn turns good old Ted Raimi into a deadite. And he wastes no time in shoving the key in Tappert's skull. Now that Ted is possessed, he officially declares that he's going to use the kids' live show tonight to turn all the kids in Chicago into deadites and rule the world. And then demonically laughs into the camera. Cut back to The Love of Painting, where Norm is finishing up his last painting for the show. And he sadly has to inform the people that this is the last time they're going to be seeing him. And you can tell that this really hurts everybody in the room, even Claudia. As he's saying his final goodbye, Daddy Teddy finds his way to them. And he starts to wreak havoc in the studio, which Norm doesn't appreciate. He politely asks the deadite to leave while rolling up his sleeve, showing off his Semper Fi tattoo. And when the deadite refuses to leave, well, Norm just kicks his ass. But no matter what he does, the deadite just keeps getting up. So finally, he just fills his mouth with paint thinner and lights his head on fire. It's probably the coolest thing they do with this whole episode. I love that. Which gets the job done. So they pick up George and they make their escape. But as they're leaving, looks like someone else is still alive. Cut back to Bookberry, who's been in the bathroom this whole time. What am I saying? I probably take longer in the bathroom. She pours herself a nice glass of whiskey and starts to get ready for her live show when she hears,
You worthless piece of shit.
what the hell? Apparently, her dad was very mentally abusive to her as a kid. Now he hears her voice coming through her puppet, Henrietta. Henrietta berates her, starts telling her how stupid and ugly she is and how she's never gonna make it big time. But all she wants to do is make her daddy proud. When suddenly, there's a knock at the door. Bookberry thinks it's a director trying to get her to hurry up and come out, but she's not ready yet and she's not afraid to tell them.
Fuck off, Greg. I'm not taping anymore.
But they keep just knocking and pulling and jiggling the doorknob. So finally she gets up, opens the door too. That's not good. The group make it to the appraiser studio and they find it completely demolished and there's bodies just littered everywhere. They decide it's best if they check the footage to find out what exactly happened there. But before we see what's on that footage, we get a really cool scene. We get a classic Evil Dead shot as we see the demons flowing through the hallway, and it stops at Bookberry to show us she's turned as well. The group watched exactly what we did earlier in the show, but as he's saying the incantation, Norm tells him to stop.
Listening to wretched incantations is not going to improve our situation here.
Norm and Claudia think if they find the book, they probably can find a way to stop the Deadites, but they can't seem to find it anywhere. Found it! And it looks like the Evil Dead got to poor Tapper too. And this scene is really cool because they use special lights behind the actors to make it feel more like a comic book, and which is something they do for the rest of the series that I really like. It's a nice little touch to the series. George sees this from the audio room up top and panics a little bit to try to figure out what he needs to do. So he just starts turning different knobs and stuff to mess with the audio, which makes a screeching noise fill the studio room, making the Deadite run away. And they all group back up in the audio room and try to figure out how to get the Necronomicon.
The Homoeticon?
But this time, they're interrupted by Miss Bookberry's show starting. She looks a little deranged, if you ask me. And what happened to Henrietta's eyes? Looks like the Deadites' plan is working flawlessly. Bookberry starts to read the Necronomicon on live TV, so hundreds of kids in Chicago are getting possessed right now. When the group finally make it to the studio, and Claudia gives us one badass one-liner.
I'm responsible for the program quality of Channel 13, and this show does not meet WQPS standards.
It's so goofy and badass. I love it. It's so good. Best line in the whole series. Best line ever, actually. But the Deadites aren't scared of some measly humans, so they ask, what are you gonna do about it? And Norm tells them,
We're going to beat the devil out of you.
they're so smart. How did they think of that? Then he uses the snowblower and the Civil War coins from earlier and absolutely peppers the Deadites in silver coins, which seemingly kills them, but of course they don't die that easy. Bookberry tells Claudia that the book hungers for young souls, but Claudia won't let that happen. She's actually so cool, dude. Also, here's a clip reminding you that they are in fact live on TV right now. Isn't that awesome? And since Bookberry doesn't have a head anymore, I guess it's Henrietta's turn to take over. Luckily, she's just a puppet, so you can just grab her and rip her away from the book. Oh, they're trapped. And George got knocked out. This is a predicament. Oh, I forgot! Norma's a Marine, so he easily escapes the Deadite's grip and rips the key out of his forehead. He then runs up, kicks Henrietta out of the window, literally, slams the book on the table, locks it shut, and defeats the Evil Dead, or the Evil Dead. They don't really say what it is. Cut to a few weeks later, and Norm got his show back with a bigger budget. And also, Chicago wants his show to go national. So things are really looking up for everybody. And everybody just thought that what they saw live on TV was just a stunt set up by the station to get more viewers. So an accidental publicity stunt actually worked. And now that Bookberry is dead and not hogging up all the time slots, they have more room for other shows.
Maybe it is karma.
And the story ends with a slow zoom out of the TV showing the kids watching The Love of Painting. Or maybe not. Transition back into the comic book, and we see that the comic book panels around it are actually the Necronomicon. We get a short little animated clip of the creep putting his own Necronomicon back on the bookshelf. And that's the end of the episode. Yes, I know this episode is super wacky, not really scary at all, but it's one of my favorites ever. I really enjoy this episode. Even Model Kid before it is really fun to sit down and watch. And Mark Ashworth, the man that played Norm, I think he did a really good job at capturing the essence of Bob Ross. He was a very peaceful person, and the little clippets of his show that we did get to see were actually really nice to watch and does remind you of the joy of painting. So I think he did a really good job. And there's also a few small details that I want to point out that I'm sure I've missed a lot more, but here's just 3. The Necronomicons don't look exactly the same, but they look pretty similar to where if you haven't seen the movies in a while, you'd think it was the same thing. There's also a Michael Myers mask hidden in the background of the appraiser's road trip right here. And on Mrs. Bookberry's set, at the beginning of the episode, the children look normal, they have normal eyes, but whenever they're reading the Necronomicon out live to the other children, the cutout kids' eyes are whited out like the kids at the end of the episode. Really small detail, something you probably missed that I noticed. Let me know any details I missed that you saw in the comments below. Let me know what episodes of Creepshow you want to see in the comments below. Like the video if you liked the video. Thank you for watching the video all the way through. I appreciate you all, and peace.